Hello, everybody. Welcome to another in our quick video chats for EDU 573. Today, for the people who are choosing to do the lesson plan portfolio or the Masters Plus certification students who have to do the lesson plan portfolio as part of their final, I wanted to just go over briefly my expectations, what files to use, and the rubric that I'm going to use to grade you. But first, let's just talk about lesson planning in general. Some schools and principals will require you to hand in lesson plans. Others may require you just to hand in objectives. As a teacher, yeah, you probably don't write the full-blown lesson plans out the way that we're going to do, but we're trying to make all of the internal thinking that good teachers do explicitly available to you. And you explicitly write down what you would do, so then I can provide you feedback. But often as a teacher, I still planned. It was just a bulleted list on a piece of paper. I'd walk in on Monday and put up the objectives for every day and the homework for my students. Granted, that would change by Monday at 9:30, but it was the very first thing I did every day, was just write my agenda for the week using student learning objectives. So that's really what you're trying to internalize, that systematic plan that will connect both to your content and your skills that you are building. So what do I think about lesson plans in general? Let me just go over a brief synopsis. So first, you have to explicitly define and model learning targets for your students. And that means so much more than just writing an objective on the board. Or even worse, just putting a Common Core state standard on the board and calling that your objective. I mean, you can unpack a standard and find 5, 6, 7 different learning targets in there. Now, I'm using the word learning target in the phrase of that I mean an objective stated in a way that students can understand what their goal is. And that's a key difference between writing an objective on the board and doing learning targets with your students. I should be able to walk around the room and ask kids what they're learning and why they're learning it, how it connects to what they've previously learned, and how it connects to their long-term goals. That's really what it means to define learning targets. They're often written as I can statements, so I can segment phonemes, I can blend phonemes. They're written in that kind of way for students. Then you have to come up with some kind of activities that would elicit evidence of this student knowledge growth towards those learning targets. And this is the key idea and that you need to really hone in on. Does your learning activity align to your stated learning target? Next, we evaluate the evidence of knowledge growth. And again, a key difference between good teachers and great teachers or how involved students are in evaluating this knowledge growth. They should be looking at evidence of growth in their work and in the work of their peers. Then you use that evidence and act on it. You adjust your instruction. This might be developing new learning targets for the next day, or it could be simply on the fly adjustment to what you're doing as you do a quick check-in around the students. So lesson planning is really this cycle of instruction in my mind. Now, on our class website, I've given you a couple files. The first file is your template, the Southern Connecticut State University's lesson planning template. And the next file is the rubric that I'm going to use to assess you. Now, the rubric I'm using to assess you is actually part of the Southern Connecticut State University student teaching rubric. I'm doing the second domain. The rubric is a 4-part domain, but I'm going to just use the planning domain to use that to judge your lesson plans. And this is good because it's really based on the Connecticut SEED model. It shares a lot of commonality. There's only 3 scales in our rubric that's for NCATE purposes, whereas the SEED will have 4 scales. But most of the language is very similar, and that will help you out. So I wanted to share these materials. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And you'll see right there the the folder and the files that you will use. I did add the entire Southern Connecticut State University Student Teaching Rubric to the folder if you want to look at it. But when we look at the lesson plan template, all right, it's broken up. You know, you have your basically your introduction. I do want to have a connection to the Common Core State Standards. These can either be in you know, reading, writing, or speaking, listening, or even the foundational skills if you want to do that. Now, you know, I've told you what you're working on, what your 5 lesson plans need to be, so you need to link those to the standards. And here's where your objective, now your objective is, you know, what the learners will be able to do. And those don't have to be written as learning targets per se. You can write a regular student learning objective. Now here's the initiation. This rubric says 10 to 15 minutes. This is one of the big pitfalls I often see in new student teachers, or especially student teachers that are getting observed. They want to just do the coolest initiation. They'll bring in costumes and outfits. Heck, I did the same when I was first starting out teaching. And I would still do it when I would launch huge units. But if you only have 45 minutes of time, don't take up 15 minutes setting up the lesson, all right? Think of that initiation time. Not only do you need to hook the students, but that's where you are explicitly defining and modeling your learning target. That should be the goal. And then you can describe in your lesson development the rest of those steps. Now, with closure, this is where you really want to link it back to the learning targets and explain and have a discussion on what you've accomplished, what your learning targets were, what the prior knowledge was. You know, just close up the lesson. Too often, new teachers skip over on closure. Your assessment is very important. It's the second thing I do. I do my objectives first and then my assessment second, because I want to make sure that the way that I am going to evaluate that knowledge growth does connect to that student objective. Then I go back and write my lesson development in a way that would, you know, include that kind of assessment. Modifications and differentiation. Now, here's what usually happens with new teachers. They'll say student A is blind, student B is deaf, and student C is ADHD, and they'll recommend preferential seating for all 3. You know, let's get away from physical disabilities and really talk about differentiating based on content. So what I'd like you to do here is think about the students as mastering or not mastering the content versus as in needing a modification based off of a 504 or an IEP. If you don't know what those terms are, you need to learn them quick. So instead, what you do is look at a standard up, or look at a Common Core State standard down, and figure out how, you know, if you're in the 6th grade standard, what would, if somebody's already met at you know, that those are grade level expectations. So if they've already met that grade level expectation, what would the 7th grade standard look like? Or if they're struggling, what does the 5th grade standard look like? And what maybe is it in that they are missing that they didn't get? So really, I want you to focus in your differentiation based on content, not on disability. All right. Now, the rubric is also there available for you, and it is based on you know, it's got a couple indicators. There's 3 indicators, and each indicator is made up of different attributes, and you can use that to really look at how you're planning your lesson between acceptable and target in these categories. And I will provide each of you guys feedback on your lessons and your portfolios using this rubric holistically. I will give you a score as your overall in your planning, and then I will also score at the indicator level. I don't really score at the attribute level. Those attributes make up the indicators. So it's not like you're going to get a score for every one of these boxes. You're going to get an overall domain level score, and you're going to get 3 indicator scores with some areas of strength and development in terms of feedback. And like always, you know, I know, so that's pretty much the files. And I know your first instinct is to send them to me to have them get checked out. However, I'm not going to provide feedback on drafts until you have already met with a peer edited, peer revised. You know, find a partner in class, and if you're in the Masters Plus Cert, or if you chose to do the lesson plans as, you know, a Masters only student, find somebody that's in class and switch lesson plans. You know, then I can provide you feedback, but you need to rely on each other as peers first before me. All right, if you have any other questions, I'll be back, and I will be doing these more of these series on the other options of the final, and the next one will be building a classroom website using WordPress. All right, thanks all. Bye.